So today's Saturday. It's the day after Good Friday. We've all done what we do on Good Friday. Some of you went fishing and shopping and playing golf, hanging out with your friends and your family. Got a day off from work. And as we talked about last night, this is the day, Good Friday is the day that we acknowledge and literally celebrate the fact that Christ went to the cross. But a lot of times Saturday gets overlooked because we celebrate Good Friday and then we jump straight to Easter on Sunday. But it's the day in between that a lot of things are happening. It's the day between the cross and the resurrection that a lot of people just overlook. We take a day off Friday. We go to church on Sunday. But what about Saturday? Just for a moment, let's just pause and let's just think about tonight as you're with your family, whatever you're doing, maybe the ball field, I don't know. But let's just take a moment and just think about Saturday. Can you imagine what the disciples were thinking today? They've just seen Jesus crucified. They've just seen him literally have his skin ripped off his body. They've seen him beaten, mocked. They've seen all of it. They saw the guards as they were laughing at him. They heard the religious leaders as they were yelling, "Crucify him," even literally after he's standing in his own blood and a crown of thorns on his head, dressed in purple as they mock him and make fun of him. They've seen all this. Emotionally, they are way beyond spent. Mentally, they are overwhelmed. They're just literally dying on the inside. It's like, living through the worst day of your life, and you experience it. And then you get to the morning after. If you were able to sleep, you get up and you kind of mosey around, rehashing the day before, thinking about, is this real? I mean, is this true? If you personally have ever lived through a hard day, maybe someone you knew died, or you got the worst news of your life, and you tried to, struggle through the night of sleeplessness, and you get up the next day and you're kind of like, is this real? Like, did it really happen? And then yeah, it happened. Like, this is for real. This is the new normal. And so the disciples are experiencing that today. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is experiencing that today. Mary Magdalene is experiencing that today. Joseph of Arimathea, wherever he is today, he is talking about someone who is now in his tomb, in his grave. He gave it to Jesus. There's all kinds of storylines that are going on the day after the crucifixions. People talking, people moving around. They're expressing what they saw. And just a bystander was talking about how dark it got and how unbelievable. The priests are down scratching their head going, who tore the veil? Like, how did that happen? There's so many things happening today. But something interesting. Before we get to Easter, you need to understand that Satan's still working, and the enemies of the cross of Christ are still in defense mode. In fact, the Bible tells us a pretty crazy little illustration story. It's not an illustration, it's real. But in Matthew 27, it talks about the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day, and you can read it for yourself in Matthew 27, following verse 57, chapter 27 and verse 57, that it says that the religious leaders went and they demanded that someone stand at the grave. They demanded that the grave be guarded. They demanded that someone watch after the body, because as they recount it and tell it, they knew that Jesus had said, "In 3 days I will rise." And they were concerned. They were afraid. They were afraid that Jesus somehow, and his disciples somehow, would have orchestrated this just theft of his body, that they would go in, they would remove the body, that they would leave the grave empty so that they could promote this far-fetched idea that someone actually rose from the dead. These Pharisees and religious leaders were working overtime to make sure that Jesus stayed dead. They needed him to stay dead. They needed him to not only die on a cross, but then stay in the grave. He can't come out. There's no way that his body can be removed, because if it's removed and this thought is he lived, he came back, he is resurrected, it would completely undermine everything they did. He would gain more power in that than just the crucifixion alone and just in what he had said to the crucifixion. So they were in absolute panic mode. We've killed him, but he has to stay dead. So they go and they ask, can you put guards outside the tomb? Can you make sure that there's something keeping out people? And Pilate says to them, you got your own guards. You go seal it. Basically Pilate says, look, if you're concerned about that, this was a nightmare to begin with. I didn't want to be there. I washed my hands of it. You all demanded it. You've got your own guards. How about you religious people and you Pharisees go take your guards and stand outside the tomb. You watch it. And so that's exactly what they do. They go and they post up some guards at the tomb where Jesus lay. And then the Bible says that they put a seal on it to make sure that even if it's tampered with, they'll know because they have sealed the tomb in such a way that it can't be tampered with. And they've got their own guards there. But it's Saturday. It's Saturday. And while we have experienced pretty great Saturday weather and it's sunny and we're looking forward to Easter, some of you have been cooking and some of you have been mowing, some of you have been getting ready for tomorrow. You've been picking out your shirts and your dresses and getting the kids ready, making plans. It's Saturday. And today is the day that the religious leaders and the Pharisees feared. The disciples were scared. Mary and all of her friends were probably still in sheer panic and disarray and shock. But it's Saturday. Sunday's not yet come. Friday is over. It's the day between the cross and the resurrection. But God's up to something. See, here's the thing about Saturday. On Saturday, the religious leaders and the Pharisees were determined to keep Jesus in the grave, to keep him dead. They wanted to make sure now that they've killed him that he stays dead, that even the memory of him stays dead, that this legend of this mere man stays dead. Good riddance. Now we can take this part of history out and we can rule the day. But the problem is on this Saturday, the religious leaders and the Pharisees made some pretty big mistakes in their assumptions. Number one, they assumed that Jesus was mere man, that he was just a prophet, that somehow, some way he had these little abilities, that he could do some special things, but that's all he was a man. These Pharisees and religious leaders of the day they underestimated the power of Christ. They did not realize that he was literally not just man, but he was also literally God. He's the Son of God. He is divine as divine gets. And they thought that they could take this divine Son of God and shove him in a tomb and keep him there. They thought they could post up a guard and keep him there. They thought they could seal the tomb and it can never be manipulated or worked against. They could keep him there. They thought they could keep Jesus dead. Boy, did they underestimate who they were messing with. Did they underestimate who they were in the presence of? They completely underestimated who they had crucified. They completely underestimated who this Jesus was. Jesus was not mere man. He's the Son of God. He was sent for a purpose. He was sent for a purpose, and that purpose was to die. But as we all know, that purpose was not just to die, but it was to live again. It was to resurrect. The problem is these mere men who thought that Jesus was just merely one of them, that he would stay dead, they forgot. They did not understand. They overlooked. They were in complete denial. They blasphemed against the fact that he was God. And there was not one thing they could do on Saturday to keep him in that tomb. Yeah, the disciples are fearful and they're running around. Mary's fearful and she's scared and still in shock. The religious leaders and Pharisees are saying, we got him now. We're going to keep him in. But they completely underestimated who they were messing with. This was the Son of God. There's not one thing they could do to keep him in that grave. There was not one thing they could do to keep him behind that stone. They could have posted up thousands of guards. But Jesus Christ was going to resurrect and he was coming. But it was only Saturday and no one really understood that yet. They had heard him say it, but nobody really knew what was about to happen next. The second mistake they made was to think that that old grave could hold him back. Can you imagine? He's in the tomb. That's where he's supposed to be. He's in the grave. That's where he's supposed to be. They thought that that grave could hold him. They thought that grave could hold Jesus. Somehow, some way, they thought that the thing that he had created could hold him back, could keep him in. They completely underestimated what was going on inside the tomb. Who had created the grave, who had created the tomb, but was also the one in the tomb. That grave didn't stand a chance. There wasn't a stone big enough. You could have placed a mountain outside that stone and it would have still been moved the next day. They underestimated Jesus. They underestimated the power of that grave. It's kind of weird if you think about it, because it would be like if there was a common criminal running around the streets here in our community and hurting people and harming people, and ultimately he loses his life. And we all go before the judge and the police and say, "Where is he?" And they say, "We've got his body in the morgue. It's down there at the funeral home and it's locked up." And we said, "Well, we're putting police down there. We're going to make sure no one comes in and tampers with it or steals his body or makes something out of it." We would all go, "Are you nuts? What's wrong with you? He's dead. Like, he's not breathing. He's been dead for hours. He's not going anywhere. Ain't nobody going to steal it." That's exactly what these people were doing. They were trying to hold Jesus in a tomb. They forgot who was laying in the tomb. They forgot that tomb had no power over Jesus. And it's Saturday. It's Saturday. It's all it is. It's Saturday. It's the day between the cross and the resurrection. And I'm here to tell you today that there's not a grave on this planet that can hold Jesus. The only reason that grave was successful for the 3 days that Jesus was in it was because Jesus allowed it. If Jesus wanted to walk out of that grave in 2 days, he could have. And if he wanted to come out in a day and a half, he could have. The only reason that the grave was powerful enough to hold him in the first place was not because of the power that's in the grave itself, but because of the power that was in the grave in the form of Jesus. And the only reason that he was dead in the first place was not because we were successful in crucifying him and killing him. It was because he successfully laid down his life. He gave it up. It's only Saturday. There's no power in death anymore. Jesus is defeating it. There's no power in sin anymore. Jesus has crucified it. It's just a matter of moments in time. By this time tomorrow, Jesus will be out walking amongst his people. He will be alive. It's just Saturday. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11, we're going to sit down and we're going to celebrate Easter, the third day, where Jesus arose, came out of that tomb, right? As the religious leaders and the Pharisees tried to kill him, which they were successful, they tried to keep him, which they're not going to be successful. We're going to celebrate the day he walked out. We're going to talk about the butterfly effect. We're going to talk about the one decision that we can make. Did you realize that Jesus, before he goes to the cross, gave his disciples some instructions? He told them some things. There were some words that he gave them, and he said, "Let me tell you something, guys. There's some things you need to understand." It would be like if you sat down with someone that you love that has cancer and it's terminal, and they said, "There's some things I want you to know, and I want you to get this right from now on." You would do everything to hang on those words to make them proud. But Jesus not only says it before the cross, but when he comes out of the tomb and spends 40 days with his people and his disciples, he says it again. He bookends these thoughts. They're the same thought, and he bookends them. Wouldn't you think that if Jesus took that much time before the cross and that much time after the resurrection to tell us how we should be living our life, shouldn't we listen? It's called the butterfly effect. It's the one decision that you can make that will cause a ripple effect in time so that Jesus Christ gets the glory. I want you to join me in the morning, 8 o'clock, 9:30, 11 o'clock at the Grove. It's just Saturday. But as S.M. Lockridge said, Sunday's coming. It's just Saturday, but Sunday's coming. In the morning, we're going to get up and we're going to celebrate the fact that Jesus is alive. Friday couldn't keep him. Saturday couldn't hold him. Sunday, he rolled out of that grave. And the world has forever been changed because of the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. The butterfly effect. Would you take part in making one decision? We have a goal of $150,000 tomorrow. I don't know what you and your family is going to do, but me and my family are going to give big because there's a butterfly effect. It's nowhere near the butterfly effect of the scratching sound of the rocks rolling away from the tomb. It's nowhere near the effect of King Jesus stepping foot outside of the grave. It's nowhere near the effect of what Jesus did on the cross. But because of what he did and the butterfly effect of what he did, it allows me to make one decision, to do my part in raising the funds that would forever tell the story of the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Join us in the morning at the Grove, 8 o'clock, 9:30, 11 o'clock. I can't wait to see you there as we celebrate the magnitude of Easter.